This is about 80 acres in the Shenandoah Valley.
Nice.
As you drive in here, you see the mountain views. But the funny thing is, like, we're in this amazing destination and Shenandoah National Park is beautiful. But the Getaway experience is just kind of about being here. And this is I think, a beautiful piece of land. But it's still a simple piece of land. This is not, you have views for 75 miles. This is not, you're on an oceanside cliff. And it's not meant to be. It's meant to just be, it's trees and it's quiet. My buddy Pete and I were burned out, wanted to get out of the city, wanted to get offline, and wanted to have a campfire. So we discovered tiny houses and we said, okay, maybe we can just personally, not as a business, buy or build one of these things and put it in the woods, and that's it. We don't want to go to the Caribbean, we don't want to go to the Hamptons. We just want to have a place that we can escape the city. And thought, well, maybe there's some other folks that feel the same way. So when you get to Getaway, the first thing you're meant to do, we hope, you open the cell phone lockbox, you put in your cell phone, and then you lock it up. People ask us, well, do you enforce locking up the cell phone? And we're not at the point of enforcing the cell phone lockbox yet, but maybe one day. And I'm getting a text. I'm gonna leave it. We don't mean to guilt people, but I know in my own life, like, I intend to go home at the end of the workday and put my phone away and put my email away. And it doesn't always happen. And part of our theory is you need to change your context to disconnect. Those barriers are important. And so this is one barrier, but another barrier, of course, is coming out here 2 hours outside of your city and getting away from the things that typically distract you. So core to the experience, of course, is sleep. All of our houses have either 1 or 2 queen beds, and they all, almost all of them, have this big window with a view into nature. And this is really what we think is the core to the experience. You'll notice there's no TV here, there's no Wi-Fi. This is your TV, this is your Wi-Fi, if you are longing for something to do. And we hear from guests all the time that it was the quietest night they'd had. It was the darkest night they had that they could remember. They loved waking up literally under the canopy of the forest. I kind of love this experiment of, like, this is not a view most of us get if we live in the middle of Manhattan or New York or Boston or LA.
So it's just all window on that side.
That's it. It's actually surprised me how powerful it's been. People really connect with this view. And I think that's, of course, about nature and light and all that good stuff, but I think there's something aspirational about it. About we can just have a simpler life where you lay in a bed and look at the leaves. I was really lucky, and I grew up on the one of the first lakes on the Mississippi River in the trees. Like, this was my view growing up. And so a lot of this company for me is just trying to get back to that. Like, my parents' home, which my dad built, was this pine. My mother works in the factory that makes the pine. I've had a bunch of weird living situations during my teens. I lived for a long time on a boat on Lake Superior, which forces you into nature. Later, I opened a frozen yogurt shop in college, and I lived in the basement. So my buddy and I, who I started it with, could save our money from our scholarships and put it into frozen yogurt equipment. While we were renovating the frozen yogurt shop, I lived illegally in the college library. I borrowed this Airstream from the friend of a friend and hit the road for 8,000 miles through the West for about 5 months. And in fact, it was too big for me. It was 26 feet long, but it forced me out into the world. And later on that trip, I heard about tiny houses for the first time. I said, okay, I get this idea of living life around experiences rather than stuff. And we try to provide the tiny experience to more people. There's multiple tiny houses on the property, and we host multiple people here every night. So right now there's like 20 houses here, but we try to keep them far apart so everybody has their own view, because it's a private experience. There are a lot of experiences in life that are about socializing and meeting people and networking, and those might be great experiences, but this isn't one of them. This is like, you don't have to meet any people. And people ask us, why don't you do a group fire pit? Why don't you do a group yoga thing? Why don't you do a picnic pavilion? And like all of those things would be pretty easy to do, but we just want to provide one thing, and we want to provide it really well, and that's the opportunity to just have some time and space for yourself.
Each one seems to be tucked into the woods.
Yeah, we try to, there's multiple houses on this property, but we work very hard to make sure everybody has their own sight lines into the forest, that when you are at the campfire alone or with your loved one or whoever you came with, that you feel like you are having a private experience. And so you can see this one. You could walk, I don't know how far into the woods from here. It's both so quiet and so loud. It's quiet because there's no horns honking, there's no people fighting on the street, there's no city noise, but like crickets can be like deafening, as we're hearing now. Cicadas can be deafening. When I'm looking for property, one of the checks is stand on the property. What can you hear? Can you hear a road? Can you hear an airport? And it's surprising how many pieces of land, rural land, where you can hear highway noise.
These had to be mobile?
Yeah, so these are tiny houses, 8.5 feet wide by 16, 20, 24 feet long. And that allows us to put them in places you couldn't build traditional accommodations. So our houses are about 160 square feet each, and so they don't have the stuff you would expect in a normal house. You know, we like to think they have everything you need and nothing you don't. So there's a little kitchenette, 2-burner stove, hot and cold running water, of course, sink, little mini fridge. Yeah, so this is my bachelor dinner for tonight. So I'm thawing my sausages. So we try to provide everything. So there's, you know, pots and pans and a couple of cups, a couple of plates.
And they're kind of campy, like camping
yeah,
stuff, right? Like,
I mean, part of what we think we're doing is allowing people who wouldn't otherwise camp to camp, for people who used to camp, but now they don't have the gear. Yeah. So this is our massive bathroom. It has tremendous features like a toilet and a shower. You know, one of the things we're focused on is durability without losing character, so you'll see stainless here quite often. And one of the fun things about the business is we've been able to iterate this house. And so where if you were to build a 100-room hotel, you'd build it all at once, we've been able to build it one room at a time. So, you know, we've made every mistake you can make. In the first houses, these countertops were plywood, and they looked great for a couple of weeks, and then they were water stained. And so we've replaced those with stainless steel that we think both looks good, but also can withstand the test of time.
And the floor feels like kind of typical cabin.
Yeah, this floor was sort of inspired by the New England painted hardwood floors. Like, you can see that it's getting marred up here. The jury is still out on whether this marring is character or flaw. Yeah. As we thought about designing this, we do care about that moment when you walk in the door. You've gotten away from the city, you're away from work. We want you to just open the door and go, great, like, what a relief. Here's a moment that I can just have for me. The experience of this cabin isn't really about the cabin. Like we like to say, architecturally, we want this to be a piece of hardware that allows you to escape to nature. Like the star of the show is that view. Not about, you know, what decor did we pick out, not even really about what materials did we use. It's just about, does this allow you to get away from whatever's going on back home? As we thought about designing this, it's a small space, and so as much light as we can get to come through, we want to come through. This is a tiny house, obviously, so it's on wheels and 8.5 feet wide. This is actually one of our longest. They've actually gotten a lot smaller than this, so this one's, I think, 24 feet long. We now have several that are 16 feet long, which was us pushing the envelope a little bit. And to our surprise and delight, when it went from 24 to 20 to 16 feet, people seem to like it just as well. And in fact, I walk into this space and it just feels loaded with extra space. What is this cube by the door? Like, why do we have all this space by the desk? So we designed Getaway. It's really meant to be a reflective experience. And so one small nod to that is a little space you can write. Another nod to that idea is we try to get people to do nothing. It's like, just be bored. You don't have to go hiking. You don't have to go cross-country skiing. You don't have to go fly fishing. But if you can't do nothing, then we give you a little book of things that we're okay with you doing. So make a commitment to yourself. Here's how to build a campfire. Go forest bathing, which is this concept of just walking in the woods is good for you. And it's actually in Japan and Korea being prescribed by doctors. Look for some birds. You know, here's some deep questions to ask your travel companions. Whatever those things that get us away from our devices, away from our work, away from the stress of daily life. Oh, you're locked out. I can help, I think.
Thank you so much.
Which activities have you been doing?
I'm just looking for the flower that the book said.
Find 2 of these flowers.
Yes. Oh, wow. I found 2.
You found 2? Yeah?
Yeah, it's right like over there.
That's pretty good because I'm not sure we even checked to make sure they're here. We get this mix of people, some of whom are avid outdoors people, and some of whom have never left the city before. The thing that seems to be common among them, though, is this overwhelming desire to disconnect, get out of the city, get offline. It has surprised us genuinely how many people don't want a pool, don't want, you know, a swim-up bar, don't want a luxury hotel. Say that again. The luxury is, get me out of my daily routine. Yeah, I just opened it, but there's no key in it. All right, can you text me back when you get a hold of him? The site manager is going to bring you a key. So you should be here soon. So, sorry about this.
It's okay.
We'll make it up to you somehow. You bet. And if he should show up, but if he doesn't, I'm there. Okay.
Thank you for your thank you.
The fire is just center of the experience for us. We make it easy. For if you've never started a fire before, I say that now. We'll see how this goes. Because I grew up making campfires, it didn't occur to me when we started the company that we'd have to, you know, explain it. And we set up all the houses with emergency phones, but we'd get all these calls at the beginning of the company and we'd say, how can we help you? And they'd say, everything's great, we really love it. Can you please send someone over to teach us how to start a campfire? And so now we have detailed instructions on how to create a campfire in all the houses. This is old, right? Making a campfire. That's one of the things about the company, but we really try not to pretend we're disrupting anything. We're trying to make a very old thing new again, or more accessible to a few more people. We don't pretend to be disrupting nature, disrupting hospitality, disrupting taking a break. We hope we're making some of those things easier for some people. But this is really quite an old thing we're doing, which is trying to get people to have a campfire in nature. It's funny because cabins are hundreds of years old, but also having a resurgence. When we started this, we genuinely didn't think we were part of a trend. This was us saying, my buddy Pete and I saying, we've tried creating companies that are cool or trendy or like meant to like make a lot of money, and we failed at that. Let's start something that we want. And I guess that just happened to be at a moment when other people were also looking for simpler living, simpler time off, getting away from work. And I think the cabin is this vessel that just stands for simplicity and disconnection and, like, dare I say, is a bit nostalgic. It reminds us of a time, even if we didn't live through it, where we didn't have to respond to everything within an hour, let alone 24 hours. When we didn't have to do conference calls on our vacations. I'm not a Luddite, I don't want to go backwards, but I still think that's worth hanging on to once in a while. Right? Just because we're not going to undo the internet, nor should we undo the internet, doesn't mean we should not try to have balance from its implications. But this is why we are loath to think of ourselves as anything like a hotel. Because a hotel's agnostic as to what you do. You pay them money, you drop your bags, you do whatever you want. You can watch TV, you can go to a dinner down the block. We care a lot about what you do at Getaway. We're thinking about, well, what happens after you leave this place? And so we give you an envelope, open this after you get home, which I won't spoil the surprise. We think this can be a special time and place for you to get away from all those things that bother us in our daily lives. You know, things that we love. Like, we don't want to, like, I love my job, but I'm better at it when I'm away from it. I live in the city, but the city's better if I get out of the city once in a while. I use a lot of technology, but if I'm connected all the time, I start feeling crappy. There's this scientific concept called the soft fascination of nature, which sounds too fluffy to be true, but it's an actual, like, scientists study it, and it's about why do leaves capture our attention, why do flickering flames in a fire pit capture our attention. Unlike paint drying, it's just enough stimulation that it keeps our mind focused so we don't get bored, but not so much stimulation that we get overwhelmed or anxious. It is surprising to me even that there's all this science that shows nature's so good for you, like it's factual. But yet we all kind of know it, don't we? From walking in the park, from those of us who are fortunate to grow up in a place with a lot of nature, we know that it makes us feel better, and science has validated that. My philosophy is that there's a great imbalance brought by the digital age. It feels like a worn out topic a little bit because we all sort of know that we don't have balance in our lives, but we have to remember that the internet's like 25 years old in most of our lives anyway. And we are just starting to see implications it has on our life. I've lived through, like, oh my goodness, I get an iPhone, and I thought it was the best thing in the world. And, you know, I could, like, cook dinner and keep up with work emails. And then I lived through, you know, a couple years later, I'm going, oh my God, I can't cook dinner without checking work emails. And I think that's where society is, so the cabin is one way to balance that. At least that's what we're trying to do, but I think generally the cabin was a place where you didn't work, you obviously didn't have city noise, you didn't have pollution, you didn't have technology, you know, fighting for everybody's attention. In fact, like the knock on the cabin, at least a couple of decades ago, was life is too slow. You're going to stop here and listen to the screen door slam. Not to be too cliche, but like that sounds pretty nice. I mean, time is the luxury. I think like money, I think we are quickly concluding societally that money is not the luxury, time is the luxury. We are actually trying to regain the idea of boredom. And like what a radical idea that is. Is like, wouldn't it be great to be bored? And what happens when you push through that? Like, boredom isn't that pleasant of an experience. Like slowing down is pleasant, relaxing is pleasant. Boredom's kind of unpleasant. I don't know what to do with myself. But there's research that shows if you push through that, magical things happen. You have new ideas, you're more creative. You have new thoughts about yourself that are important. And that's why we were quite bizarre in saying like, not only should you not work or not do your email, like you shouldn't go skiing, you shouldn't go kayaking, you shouldn't go swimming, you shouldn't go to a beautiful farm-to-table restaurant. Like I like all of those things and I do them, but shouldn't we have a place or two or a time or two where we don't do any of those things?